What's a three-letter word that starts?
Strategy 4. Strategy 4, black underemployment and unemployment. Black men, black men, women, and children were kidnapped and transported all over the world for one purpose: to work and produce white wealth. Until the mid 20th century, the they represented America's true and senior labor system. In nearly every instance, the white lower class functioned as a management class over blacks, though in modern times they refer to themselves as the working blue collar class. The lower white class supervised blacks in jobs ranging from picking cotton and digging ditches to working in the assembly lines of large automotive plants. The value of black labor has always been controlled by the white community. Since blacks had few employment alternatives, they were regulated to the dirtiest and hardest work. Blacks' high rates of underemployment and unemployment were reflections of their expendability. They lived by the rule of being the last hired and first fired. Analysis 1. Capitalistic democracies have historically accepted a certain level of unemployment as a necessary public good and permitted businesses to use unemployment as a device for maintaining low wages. The acceptable range of overall unemployment is typically 5%, while recent white unemployment rates rarely exceed 5%. The National Urban League's Hidden Unemployment Index estimates that the jobless rate among black adults is 4 to 5 times higher than the jobless rate among white adults. Meanwhile, more than 50% of eligible black youths can't find jobs. Though this systematic black unemployment criminalizes blacks and renders them non competitive, neither the government nor larger society has demonstrated a willingness to use their vast resources eliminate to eliminate causative factors. The causative factors. 2. Over the years, blacks have consistently asked for, but seldom received, employment assistance from government. Following their 250 years of full employment as slaves, blacks asked that the government give each black family 40 acres and a mule. Government responded by reshackling them into nearly another century of semi-slavery called sharecropping. In the dying years of the civil rights protest period, blacks held national demonstrations in support of the Humphrey Hawkins Full Employment Bill. A conservative a conservative backlash led by major corporations and politicians killed the bill by claiming that the government, not the private sector, would have to hire blacks. Approximately 70% of black college graduates are employed in government because there is no black business infrastructure capable of absorbing them. Three, entrenched high unemployment is a direct result of the fragmentation within the black community. The lack of they they lack the resources and commitment to create employment opportunities, and they don't spend their disposable incomes wisely. Even if they had full employment, it would not alleviate the myriad of problems facing them. Wealth is the primary problem. Employment is secondary. There's a big difference between having a job and having wealth. Jobs are not designed to create wealth. They are they are intended to keep employees one payday away from the poorhouse and to satisfy workers' basic consumer needs. Real wealth is accumulated via investment returns and ownership profits. 4. The 20 years between 1969 and 1989 saw the introduction of controversial affirmative action policies supposedly to compensate black employees for past discrimination in the job market. Conservatives vehemently oppose those policies, charging that affirmative action unfairly advantaged and enriched blacks at the expense of whites. However, statistics suggest that affirmative action brought few real changes to the position of black employees. Between 1969 and 1989, black annual income increased by only $22 relative to white income. Moreover, from 1979 to 1989, overall black income increased by only $1. 5. Low paying minimum wage jobs are more attractive to immigrants than blacks. Immigrants see these low wage jobs as temporary stops on their way to a better life. It is a way of paying their dues. Blacks have paid nearly 4 centuries of dues, but they never had reason to be optimistic that a minimum wage job would lead them up the economic ladder. For them, those jobs were not temporary, they were permanent. Minimum wage jobs for blacks are a form of labor exploitation, a waste of brain power, and another cause of low self respect. 6. Limited employment opportunity is a major difference between black and white communities. The lack of private sector employment opportunity within black communities forces blacks to seek income from government jobs, welfare assistance, and sometimes criminal activities. All of these sources are condemned by conservatives. Yet, these same conservatives frequently resist policy changes that would create private sector alternatives in black American communities. Moreover, conservatives are the primary exploiters of government and the general public through their immoral and unfair business practices. 7. The lack of employment opportunities in Black America is not a temporary aberration. It is permanent and endemic. It must be resolved by Black America because neither the government nor the larger society has incentives to create employment opportunities for blacks. 8. The black community suffers from brain drain. The best trained blacks depend upon whites to hire them, though historically they've had very little choice in employment options. It becomes racially self defeating for blacks to devote their lives to professional careers in white businesses, in white communities, or in white controlled government agencies. The 3 century old national public policy on the use of blacks stipulated that blacks would serve as a labor force for creating wealth and comfort for whites. Little has changed because blacks are still cooperating with the policy. The concern that should be foremost in the minds of blacks is who's taking care of black businesses within the black community, while the best black brain power is taking care of the business of government and the larger community. Recommendations: 1. Blacks must accept and blacks must accept that nobody owes blacks jobs for full employment. Blacks must assume the burden of providing employment for their own people. The burden rests upon the shoulders of the black business community and those businesses located within black communities. Discrimination in hiring practices of businesses within the black community has long been a problem, especially with Hispanic and Asian merchants. These groups have cultures that stress hiring from their own group. They often hire people from their homeland, even for menial labor, before hiring blacks. That can remain their choice. But the black community must must insist that these ethnic merchants reinvest in the community. 2. Blacks should initiate measures to halt the brain drain from their communities by creating employment, business opportunities, and incentives within black communities to attract and keep the best black minds within the community. With appropriate employment and business opportunities, the best black brain power could devote time, energies, and intellect to taking care of black communities. The handful of blacks working on Wall Street, or in corporate boardrooms does not represent group progress. These advances may help individual blacks, but do little for blacks as a race. If a large number of blacks who received business training sought to develop their own businesses in black communities rather than seeking to integrate into white businesses, the wealth of blacks in America would expand beyond its stagnant 2% range. And it is likely that these businesses would be larger and more powerful than the mom and pop operations that currently make up the majority of black businesses. Strategy 5: Black and white psychosocial behavior patterns. Blacks have an acculturated, domesticated, and integrated. Blacks have been acculturated, domesticated, and integrated, but never assimilated into white society. Assimilation is the process by which a minority group learns the values and norms of the dominant culture and is then absorbed into the dominant society. After 400 years, blacks have not been absorbed. The legacy of separation remains very strong. It is unlikely that whites will ever freely absorb blacks, regardless of how blacks conform to the cultural standards of white America. If conformity and acculturation were the key criteria for black assimilation, then the white society would have absorbed blacks years ago. Slavery and Jim Crowism were socializing and conditioning processes were socializing and conditioning processes that stripped blacks of their sense of humanity and self-sufficiency. Blacks responded to these conditioning processes by developing behavior patterns that reflected a unique black personality. They were systematically rewarded for displaying behaviors that conformed to white standards, especially those that helped whites maintain their power and privileged positions. For example, black slaves were rewarded for helping white slaveholders to maintain control over slaves by informing on any activities among their fellow slaves that might have endangered whites. Though it may be uncomfortable for some to acknowledge, there are some blacks who are still selling Black America for personal gain. They clothe themselves in the uniform of the day. Sexism, conservatism, and the various other isms. But in each instance, among such blacks, the welfare of the larger black community comes last, if it is considered at all. Analysis 1. Humans have enslaved other humans for a variety of reasons as a result of indebtedness, religious differences, and military defeats. Skin color has never was never a major factor until around the 14th century. Color color entered the enslavement equation from two opposing directions. Firstly, the Mamelukes, who were the last known group of whites to be enslaved, revolted forcefully and vengefully against the Arabs and generally signaled an end to white enslavement. When the white indentured servant system started several hundred years later, it was managed via contract and mutual agreement with limited terms, no punishment systems, and bonus compensation at the close of the contracts. Secondly, Arabs imposed slavery, the Islamic faith, and the Swahili language on black Africans to get access and control of their wealth and natural resources. Arabs began enslaving and trading blacks around 800 AD. According to various sources, Arabs are still using color as a basis for enslavement and are still slave trading in the countries of Saudi Arabia, Mauritania, Sierra Leone, Libya, and Sudan. Two, black slavery was totally unlike any other form of slavery. Various Asian and Hispanic nations were colonized, but the inhabitants were never animalized, commercialized, and traded as slaves in international markets. Although blacks failed the lesson that the Mamelukes taught the world, the American Indian did not. When European whites attempted to enslave the American Indians, the Indians simply refused to perform the role of slaves. Only blacks were branded as slaves for the world, and the explanation for that must be more than whites meant more than white's loathing of black skin color. Only blacks were branded as slaves for the world, and the explanation for that must be more must be more than white's loathing of black skin color. There were East Indians, Moors, and Arabs who were just as dark, if not darker, than West African blacks, yet they were not enslaved. In the opinion of this writer, blacks were blacks alone were branded as slaves primarily because Africa remained disunited as a result of tribal structures in sub-Saharan Africa, while their natural wealth made all tribes targets of hostile foreigners. Sub-Saharan Africans alone would submit to brutal slavery and a perpetual subordinate status. After centuries of oppression, blacks have yet to come together as a strong community and conduct self empowerment activities that would free them from oppression. Instead, blacks have such little self respect that they continue to pursue integration, a process that fragments and weakens them. 3. The rewards of meritorious manumission. The law that rewarded blacks who sold out their brothers and sisters has created a legacy that is still with us. Blacks have no balance. Blacks have no balancing social devices that punish those blacks who sacrifice members of the race for their own personal advantage, nor do blacks have a device for rewarding whites who extend themselves to assist blacks. Black America is void of social accountability policies and enforcement devices. 4. It is highly unlikely that white conservatives will permit government to assist blacks because true social changes would give blacks access to all of the resources and privileges enjoyed by whites as well as cultivate the potential for black empowerment. Such a transfer or sharing of wealth, or of resources rather, would create new labor, business, and political competition that would threaten the middle class status of whites. Consequently, recorded history indicates that blacks should not count on the goodwill or moral obligation of white society. Mm. All right, let's do this. Since blacks made marginal gains in income and educational achievements in the 1960s, whites have grown increasingly callous and indifferent to blacks and their problems. They urge blacks to heal themselves, yet simultaneously block access to the resources necessary for such healing. They resist any form of civil rights legislation for blacks, even when the impact of the legislation would be minimal. A survey by the American Jewish Committee indicated that even in 1990, most white Americans believed that any changes in blacks' present conditions would be too much and too fast. They opposed any kind of government-sponsored social engineering that is designed to redistribute wealth to blacks or relieve the oppressive conditions of Black America. Most whites have yet to understand that their current privilege status resulted from government assistance and black exploitation. It is easier to believe that they acquired their status as a result of hard work and natural social ordering. Dominant culture has taught them that blacks, by nature and desire, are where they are supposed to be in the human social order. Though all whites do not have wealth and political powers, those who do, those who do not take comfort in their belief that those who have power will exercise. Okay, okay. Though all whites do not have wealth and political powers, those who do not take comfort in their belief that those who have power will exercise it in their favor at the expense of blacks. Though all whites do not have wealth and political powers, those who do not take comfort in their belief power will exercise it in their Okay. Though all whites do not have wealth and political powers, those who do not take comfort in their belief that those who have power will exercise it in their favor at the expense of blacks. Many whites harbor six. Many whites harbor subconscious fears that blacks will acquire power and become economically competitive. Many whites appear to harbor a strong dislike for blacks, though most cannot offer a rational justification for their feelings. These feelings are so deep that for centuries whites have allowed into their society immigrants from countries that were formerly or are currently hostile toward Americans. These feelings are so deep that for centuries whites have allowed into their society immigrants from countries that were formerly or are currently hostile toward Americans. Surveys indicate that as much as 50% of adult whites prefer not to have blacks in their neighborhoods, schools, and churches. Practically none would be willing to accept a black person marrying into his or her family. 7. Recent efforts to equate sexism and with racism have stymied the black civil rights movement. Lumping sex discrimination together with racial discrimination gives power holders more palatable choices for gaining civil rights credits among voters. Instead of bringing blacks into the power and wealth circles, white men satisfied their civil rights obligation by expanding the rights of white women who were their wives, daughters, sisters, and mothers. As a result, all of the political, social, and economic gains of the women's movement served to increase the power and wealth available to white families. Contrarily, black women have not been able to use the feminist movement to create any appreciable change in the lives of black families. 8. Whites have long been attracted to black music, dance, language, and sexuality. Black cultural products are sought, sanitized by white entertainers and writers, and adopted as America's pop culture. On the other hand, blacks have received neither cultural recognition nor increased wealth for their cultural products.